Alright, hello there. I'm Juno Malarvost, and this is where I talk about the logos, pathos, and ethos on characters, myths, songs, and stories, and other things of that nature while I sketch for you. And welcome to One Man's Opinion. Let me draw from my trusty bottle here. It's got my list of stuff, my list of topics. And see. Classic monsters. Alright. That's not necessarily what I'm going to be drawing, but that's what I'm going to be talking about. Alright. Which I might draw some of that too. Alright. So classic monsters, I probably should have broke that down into into specific ones. Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman. Wolfman's always been my favorite. But alright. So let's start with the Wolfman. I've always loved the Wolfman because, well, werewolves are terrifying. I even had nightmares about them whenever I was younger. Not as young as I'd like to admit. Older than I'd like to admit, to be quite honest. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. One thing that was interesting is because, I think the first werewolf movie I ever saw was what's that one? It's the third installment, Underworld, The Rise of the Lycans. That one's fun. Even though it is arguably, it is the chick flick of the Underworld series, which I can't believe the words coming out of my mouth, but it is true. If you've seen it, then you know. But basically, it's about, well, I don't know if this counts spoilers or not, but the Lycans are different. The Lycans are different because every single werewolf story is just a little bit different. They say that like in Silver Bullet. Ooh, that still might be my favorite werewolf movie. But anyways, we're getting off topic. Well, that's on topic. But anyways, the first werewolf movie I ever seen was yes, it was The Rise of the Lycans, and I don't even remember how I finally got to that point, but my family's always been big into monster movies, especially my dad and my sister. Always been crazy about them. Me, not so much. However, it was funny because I grew up listening to them while I'd hide behind the couch or I'd be playing with my toys or something. I just would never watch it, but I would listen. How did you learn our movies? I listened. Anyways, and as I listened, I ended up learning like the whole entire movie, line for line. And so they'd be like, "How in the hell of it did you learn that?" And I was like, "You guys watch it like every freaking day." Anyways, so I would learn these movies, and eventually it got to the point where I was like, you know what, fine, I'll try one. Right here, I think my sister might have been focused on it because she was a teenager. She was preteen, so she was into kind of chick flicky movies at the time. It was a very short phase. My sister's kind of, butch isn't exactly the word, but something to that effect. Anyways, something to that effect. We were listening to it, and then eventually I was like, yeah, I'll watch it. I'll watch this one. And I was like, oh, this isn't so bad. I can watch more. Interestingly enough, my sister actually kind of scarred me because she was like, oh, now he can watch scary movies. Well, I'm going to show him the Wolfman. That's the one with Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins. excellent. One of my favorite movies in general, especially werewolf movies. But um, not at the time. I got like halfway through, and we had to stop it. And I think I had nightmares for at least 3 days afterwards. Anyways, we're off track again. Every werewolf story is different, and so I'll go on to my favorite one. My favorite werewolf story. Oh, there's so many good ones. So many good ones, but I'll probably just go with what's that one? Silver Bullet. The thing I've always liked about that one, I always found interesting, was not just because, well, spoilers. Also, just always assume there's going to be a spoiler warning. Because I talk about half of what I talk, and every time I talk to people, I usually talk in movie quotes, much to a lot of people's annoyance. However, my dad is the same way, and so he and I will just basically speak in riddles almost, and in movie quotes and song quotes and all kinds of stuff, and nobody ever knows what in the holy hell we're talking about. But that's fun. We like it that way. Anyways, back to the story. The Reverend. The Reverend is, you end up finding out he's the werewolf in this little bitty town, and I don't even remember where it is. So, anyways, and I was wrong. I remember now. It was in North Carolina, somewhere in the kind of the mid-south, or what I'd call mid-south. Anyways, one of the old, close to the 13 colonies. Anyways, sorry if it's a little bit different, but this is had to do a bit of a jump for technical difficulties. Anyways, we left off. We were talking about monsters, classic monsters. So yeah, werewolves, vampires, all that stuff. All that stuff we love. No wonder that it's Mary that we love. Anyways, so no, I guess really the tragedy of all the monsters, classic monsters, especially werewolves, is that it's a curse that it affects you, or whoever's been cursed. It affects them, but really, it's on everybody else. Everybody else is the ones who suffer for it. Except with like Irish werewolves. Irish werewolves, not even really werewolves. They're guardians, protectors, that kind of thing. But so, and that's, I think, where we really, that's why it's important whenever we see the priest even as a werewolf, because it's like, oh, I mean that's the tragedy of it, because he was a good man that probably never even heard a fly in his life, and suddenly he's killing people he's is supposed to be religiously responsible for. I mean, that sting, it's gotta hurt a lot. Anyways, and then, so I guess it really kind of depends on who's telling the story, but as always, the main tragedy of it all is that it's never really about you, it's about everybody else. And yeah, I suppose, and especially because we see that in Lon Chaney's Wolfman. You see it really clearly because from the beginning, they're not really doing anything wrong, especially not like by today's standards of morally gray or whatever. They're done absolutely nothing wrong. And, you know, he goes to save Ginny, who's getting attacked by a werewolf. He ended up becoming a werewolf. And it just goes downhill from there. But then his dad suffers because he's got to watch his son go slowly mad with living with all this. And then, top of that, he's the one who ends up having to kill him at the end. He's got to kill his own son. That's pretty harsh. And there's really no reason. Nobody earned it. It wasn't even really being stupid. He was actually being rather noble. He was trying to save somebody's life. And I'd say he got bit in the butt by it, but he got bit in the chest. Anyways, so that's, I guess you could even call it a cruel irony, maybe even. And so somebody, well, that's how it goes. That's the phrase. Even a man who says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright. Just like we see in the other one, the one with the priest. He never did anything wrong, really, and not until he became a werewolf. And it just really goes downhill from there. Anyways, I would talk a lot about werewolves. That's the one I watch the most of. Those are my favorite ones. My favorite of the classic monsters. Because it's just deeply tragic and relatable in a way. I mean, everybody can kind of relate to, you know, no matter, you can't win for losing. You feel like no matter what you do, you're hurting somebody. That gets old pretty quick, you know. And then Dracula, even, he's lonely. He had a wife, he had the promise of a family, all that stuff, and he gave his life in defense of Christianity, which, I know, maybe not all of you are Christian, which is fine, but, you know, there was this honor in that. It was something that he believed in. But then, again, that kind of depends on the version you're watching, but most ones, everybody's probably more familiar with Gary Oldman's Dracula. That still is my personal favorite. I like that one better than the old black and white one. Anyways, I'm trying here, but I'm just not quite getting what I want out of this. Listen, we'll keep trucking. So, the Mummy, don't fall in love, kids. It makes you do crazy, monstrous things. I'm only kidding. Fall in love. Do fall in love. That is a beautiful thing. Yeah. There we go. And Frankenstein's really the only one that doesn't really have anything to do with really love. I mean, not really, because the only love story part of it is whenever, because Frankenstein the doctor, he's getting married, but that doesn't really affect the monster. Science fiction, double feature, picture show. You know what? Go a different route with this. Anyhow, so that's really, I guess, my deepest thoughts about the classic monsters, because I mean they each kind of represent a different part of the human psyche, at least from everything I've heard and what I've noticed and learned about them. And just the idea that it's a psychological horror, that nobody ever thinks of themselves as the monster. So what those classic movies do is they give you scenarios where it's like, hey, if you heard somebody you knew screaming in the woods for help, getting attacked by some monster, you run to help them, and then what'd you get for your effort? You got turned into the monster that ends up having to get killed by your own father, whilst you attack your lover, whilst you attack your girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever the case may be. That's just tragic. So I mean, again, another lesson, I suppose, don't go running off into the dark looking for, what was that noise? What was that suspicious thud? Yeah. Lock the doors. Go back inside. Stay inside, lock the doors. It's like, what do they say in the Appalachian Mountains? If you heard a noise, you didn't. If you thought you heard something, you didn't. Yeah. They knew what's up. Which, again, fun fact, I think just about everybody knows, but I still find it fascinating, that the Appalachian Mountains are actually, I've noticed that they're basically the same mountain range as the Scottish Highlands, which, in turn, is interesting because whenever the Scots-Irish came over, that's pretty much where they settled, was in the Appalachian territory. So, that's interesting. Oh, there we go. Now we're getting somewhere. Keep to the road, lads. Stay off the moors. Life lessons worth remembering. Let's see. Yes, keep to the road. Beware the moon, lads. And the Invisible Man, again, he was kind of motivated by, well, see, he was motivated by ambition. So was Dr. Frankenstein. They both wanted to do something, that no scientist has ever been able to do or had the gumption to even try, let alone succeed in. And then that success drives them mad. They become either power hungry or terrified of what they've created because they realize, oh crap, look what I've done. I've become the monster. I got to end this, or everybody's going to find out. You know, same thing with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So that's kind of the creme de la creme of the, oh no, I'm becoming the monster. The monster that people fear, the one that Scooby-Doo's going to come find one day. And be like, wow, you meddling kids, except you'll be lucky if it's that bad. It kind of reminds us of something that the Joker kind of teaches us in The Killing Joke. You know, most people are really only ever one bad day away from, destroying their lives. And a lot of them, and that's another thing too. Some of the movies end with kind of a good note, like Frankenstein. They end up I think if I remember right, they get married, and they kind of just live like kind of forget about the monster until he comes back to rear his poor ugly head. Which again is kind of story. The book is a little bit different because in the book he was actually supposed to be handsome. He was a perfect creation, but he wasn't perfect. He just looked like it at first. But still. And they just kind of grow from there. He ends up trying to get a wife because he's lonely and all that. But then poor Imhotep, the mummy, he really thought that, it actually shone really beautifully. And the one with who's the guy? Brendan Fraser in that mummy. In the second one, there's a really, I'd call it a really beautiful scene. It's right after they defeat the Scorpion King. And, they're, what's his name? Well, him and Imhotep, Brendan Fraser and Imhotep, they're about to fall into the pit of despair, the pit to hell. And, he finds out, what's his name? Evie. Evie, she goes running to him, and he's like, Evie, get out of here, run away, leave me go, run, save yourself. But of course, she doesn't. She's moved by love, and so she goes to rescue her husband. She goes to rescue her man, which is kind of a fun twist on tropes. Anyways. And then, of course, Imhotep sees that, and he's like, and his woman is there. His lady's there. And he cries for her. He's, come, help me, save me. She bolts. She runs. She gives up on it. And he is left there hanging on for basically nothing. Because, he rose again from the dead twice for her. And then she won't even risk her life to come save him whenever he's literally falling into hell. And so he just gives up. He just gives up and goes back to hell. Because, after that, what's the point? The whole point was to be with her. And she abandoned him. Which, I'm sure a lot of people could defend that. She was scared. Excuse my bird. Hi, NECA. Pretty good bird. Let's see where. Anyways, so yeah, there's epic tragedy in that, because especially if the whole point was love, and that love betrayed you, then it's kind of easy to go like, well, but what the hell? It's a real WTF moment. And eye-opening, and then you realize that, maybe I was the bad guy, because they obviously didn't feel the same way I felt about them, and I've done all this. The only thing that kept me from feeling like a monster was the fact that it's like, hey, I'm doing this for love. Well, then it turns out, well, that wasn't really the case like you thought it was. Then you're like, well, damn. I mean, screw me, I guess. I mean, how many times have you felt that? Have you felt like that? I know I feel that way sometimes. Not in the exact same example. I'm happily married, but and got a really good family, but you know, that's not always everything. Sometimes you can still feel alone and betrayed even. And not even just by a person, by ideals. That's why having ideals is good. It can be inspiring, but you know, if you become a slave to them, then if they betray you, then you're left with nothing. You're left holding the bag, as it were. And it's pretty hard to come back from that. So, I mean, yeah, poor Emotep. Poor Emotep, poor Mummy, poor Werewolf, poor Wolfman. And so those kind of makes us feel better, because, I mean, and most of them, the bad guys, you know, they don't get to win, which is one thing that kind of gives us hope that it's like, oh, you know, it's like, oh, the battle can be won. You know, I'm not totally defeated. I can still have hope. I can still win. You know, but then what those movies do is remind us, you know what? You might be the bad guy if you ain't careful. You should really re-examine yourself. And so it's almost twice tragic, it feels like, if you were to realize that. So I think that's really kind of the moral of a lot of those stories. There's a lot of morals, really, but I still feel like that's kind of the peak of it. Let's see. I think that's about all the classic monsters. Let me finish this up here. So yeah, and I mean, I suppose you could even really get into even deeper standpoints. You know, which one does things target? Because the both have the Mummy, especially, but also Dracula has a religious aspect to it. You know, especially take Imhotep. You know, it's ancient Egyptian, but still, there's gods and magic, and they obviously have a code of morals, and he breaks them. And then it's also sad because even in the old black and white Mummy, Ankh-Senamun, the bad guy's girlfriend, the bad guy's love interest, who he's done all this for, she even betrays him too. She goes around to the statue of Isis and just says, "Oh, forgive me, goddess of life. You know, I really botched this. Please don't let me die." That kind of thing. And then that just leaves Imhotep holding the bag. And, I mean, yes, that's true. He was trying to kill her. But in a really twisted way, he was trying to give her immortality. The only way to do that was to die first. And he also wasn't asking her to do anything he hasn't done himself. He literally rose from the dead to come get her, to come find her. And then he just withers away into nothingness. So, it's just really grim. But Dracula, you know, not being able to look at crosses, that kind of thing is very religious. And it's interesting because I can't remember it happening that way in the black and white movies, that he, like in Bram Stoker's, or the Gary Oldman's Dracula, he's fighting the Turks, I think it's the Turks, in the Ottoman Empire. And, no, it's too early. Anyways, he's fighting them, and while he's away, the princess, his wife, kills herself, and so he ends up blaming God for it, and so that's why he can't look at religious symbols, because he's been cursed by God. And so it's one of those things that, yet again, got to be really careful how you let yourself, if you let yourself become the monsters, because it's painfully easy to do if you're not very careful. And fortunately, most people do try to be careful, because nobody wants to be the monster. Very few people ever wake up and say, hey, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to go kick a puppy. Or you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go cut somebody off in traffic. Very few people want to do those things. They happen. There's also another movie called Falling Down. It's not a horror movie, but it just really kind of showcases what I'm kind of talking about, is that there's a guy, he just gets stuck in traffic and he gets tired of it and he just goes for a walk. He starts walking home, and then somebody tries to mug him, steal his briefcase. I think he kills him or something. Anyway, it just slowly just becomes the most painful day ever. And then eventually the cops have to come get him, and he's about to shoot somebody, and he turns in, I think he says, he's like, oh, I'm the bad guy. It was such a painful moment in that realization there. I think his wife's there too. And he's just like, man, all I want to do is just go home from work, And suddenly you're on national TV as almost getting ready to shoot I think he was going to shoot a kid or his kid. Something. It's like, Boulder Dash, man. Not how you thought that day was going to go. And that's after he killed some neo-Nazi person. And so, morals isn't exactly a standing point, but, it's just the same that he's like, he didn't wake up planning that. It just happened. And just, like the show says, he's falling down. He's just falling down into madness, and it's just like, dude, this got so off track so fast. I think in kind of old school ways, that's what the OG monsters were trying to tell us. That's like, they're cautionary tales. And the only way out, oh man, it gets really sad whenever you think about it, because in a way it's almost like saying the only way out is, the end. I won't say it because I don't want to give anybody heartburn or put thoughts in anybody's head, but it's just tragic. And excuse me if I'm jostling the camera a little bit. Okay. Excuse me. Trying to get some shading in here. In this mofo. Yeah, and then it just also reminds us that, there are things that go bump in the night. And if you're not careful, you could end up being one of them. And a lot of times they're infectious in a way. And it's almost impossible to fight, to combat, really, because in fighting it, you become it. So that's why they target necessity things like even, for example, Dracula. He needs blood to survive. He needs that. That's his food. I mean, heck, everybody, you ever had a craving for McDonald's fries? You know, it's just, he needs sustenance. He's got to survive. And I mean, it comes to a point where it's like, well, can you really blame him? I mean, it's not necessarily his fault. You know, I mean, it is, again, depends kind of on who's telling the story, but yeah, who's telling the story and hop down somewhere in the city, back when I keep dirty. Alright, let's see. Anyways, and then I never really kind of understood why, like, they picked the moon. Well, okay, that's actually not true. It makes sense. Wolves tend to howl at the moon, or would howl at the moon, howl in the night, and they're hunters, so they'd be out during the full moon. So no, that makes sense. But the moon's associated a lot of times with deception, with darkness. But you know what also is? It's the greatest light in the darkness. And so in a way, it's almost like a desperate cry for help. It's like asking the only source of light you can see at night, please help guide me out of this mental quagmire, as somebody calls it in the Black and White Wolfman. So, I mean, it's just all the way around not good. So don't do that. Don't go don't go looking in cemeteries for wolfsbane flowers. Don't go wrestling werewolves from their prey. Don't go dating vampires. That kind of thing. And just try to be a good person. But see, even then, sometimes you can't win for losing, even if you are a good person. You know, he who says his prayers at night may still become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright. I mean, if a priest, regardless of how you feel about priests, the idea is that they're supposed to be, you know, kind of a conduit. They're supposed to be compassionate. They're supposed to be father figures. That's the idea. That's the point. They're supposed to be symbols of God's fatherly presence. And so even that gets challenged because by the werewolfism. And so it's like nothing is safe from it. Especially in some stories they can treat even kind of like an STD, which is just weird. I mean, it kind of makes sense, you know, exchange of fluids or what have you. But still. And I've only really ever heard that once in the lore, but like I said, really no two werewolf stories are ever quite the same. Which again, they actually mention in Silver Bullet. They all agree on one. Silver Silver is the key. Oh, I wonder why. I wonder if there's a connection to Judas there. Which, poor Judas. And that may be a hot take, but I still feel bad for the guy. Because, again, not unlike the werewolf and these other classic monsters, he tried to give it back. He tried to undo it, but when he couldn't, he's like, dude, I'm lost. I have nothing else. There's nothing else I can do. And in frustration and despair, he calls it quits. I mean, that's just harsh. It's hard. Let's see, we need oh, I'm a fool. Oh, that's not turning out. Alright, here we go. Speaking of werewolves, let's try. Oh, kind of back onto what I'm drawing here. I actually recently just went on a trip to Italy, and our tour guide was talking about, the story of Romulus and Remus, and the not direwolf, and the she-wolf that suckled them whenever they were abandoned in the woods. Well, they're like, well, okay, well, that's pretty much legend, but there is some possible truth in that. And so because way back when in that time, the she-wolf was somebody who was referred to as somebody that was a woman that I think got pregnant without being married, was an unmarried woman with children. And so I was like, oh, and that way it could have totally been, I mean, not to be derogatory, but it could have been a she-wolf that raised Romulus and Remus. Because Romulus was definitely the first king of Rome. And it was also kind of sad because they explained that Rome did not actually get its name from Romulus, it got its name from the river, from the Tiber River. So originally it was known as the Tiber, or excuse me, the Tiber River was originally known as the Roma, or Roman, the Romana River. So that's kind of sad, but interesting still nonetheless. And I mean, still, dogs are very maternal anyways. Canines can be very maternal. But yeah, that's about all I got on classic monsters. Everything. Alright. I'm trying to think of something to put down here, but I can't really think of anything. So, I guess we'll just leave it at that. Thank you for watching, and this has been, I'm Juno, and this has been One Man's Opinion. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.